Welcome to another episode of Unfoodable Weekly. I'm your host, Paul Barron, and today we're going to be talking about the Uberization of hospitality. We're going to be talking to Haydn Shaughnessy, one of the global experts on scaling business. Let's get to it. With us today, I've got Haydn Shaughnessy out of Europe, and Haydn has been a multi-part guest here on several of the shows with the network. And today we're going to be talking about kind of this new evolution of management styles that's happening in the industry. And Haydn, I think, is one of the world's best experts on this very topic. So Haydn, hey, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm good, Paul, and thanks for having me on again.
Haydn, let's kind of go into a little bit about kind of this challenge that the industry is, and when I say the industry, really all of business, no matter what business you're in, whether it's hospitality, retail, technology, and so on, kind of this evolution of management style and some of the pitfalls that we've seen with companies like Uber recently, who continue to make news and waves in the headlines of many of the publications about their business practices and those kind of things. Now, before we get too deep into that, let's talk a little bit about Shift and what are you doing with that book now?
Okay, so the book's nearly ready for publication. It goes on to Amazon probably around about the time that this show goes out.
Okay.
The edition is available as of mid-January. But let me talk a little bit about the book because it's relevant to exactly what you're saying. I think that what I try to do with the book actually is to reflect some of the complexity of these issues and the complexity of the economy. And one of the big things I think we can see right now is that there are actually very clear kind of disruption points that industries suffer. And I think that if you don't get this right, it's partly a management style issue, it's partly the right technology platform, it's one or two other issues. But if you don't get this right, you can disappear. So it's a really, really important time, and the Shift is a very, very important set of signals around what you need to do, what you need to get right.
Mm-hmm. When you look at kind of companies like Uber, who just saw today kind of a jump in their valuation, they just opened up with another $1.2 billion round. Growth at an accelerated pace like that, I mean, what are some of the tactics in maybe in your book that prepare CEOs and brand leaders to deal with this massive move toward growth so quickly?
Yeah, well, it's a really interesting phenomenon actually. And as you say, that the total valuation now becomes something like 40 billion. But growth on this kind of scale and companies operating at huge scale is the new normal. And it's been in the past a very unusual thing, of course, but right now it seems to be that executives really need to know how to scale businesses and scale them very quickly. But here's some interesting data, actually. A couple of years ago, a website, The Next Web, went to a group of very experienced software developers and said, what do you think it would cost to create a WhatsApp or a Pinterest or an Uber? And these guys reached a consensus on the cost of what those kind of platforms are. So if you look at like a WhatsApp, the answer is about $250,000. You had a 19 billion valuation.
Right.
If you look at Uber, they say about 1.5 million to create Uber. We've just seen it get a 40 billion valuation. So the reality is that we're not talking these days about huge financial investments in technology. We're really talking about the people that make these things work and the ability of management to win the loyalty of a kind of millennial generation that will go out there and proselytize, advocate, and grow the business on your behalf.
The growth of these kinds of companies, whether they're technology-based or hospitality-based or those type of things, how does an executive, let's just assume that we're talking about someone like an Uber, Travis over at Uber, how are they preparing for this kind of scale? Because this just seems almost unmanageable, when you're looking at that kind of level.
Well, I actually think the secret is traditionally when we thought about these companies, or when we think about how to change an existing company, we tend to talk about the IT business dialogue. So
Right.
can you get business side talking to the IT side? Can the business side understand what the IT infrastructure today is capable of, this incredible mobile infrastructure that we now have? I think there's something significantly different right now. It's can the business talk to the CFO? I think a lot of what we're seeing is really incredible resource management and incredible cash management. So, you can rely on the IT, but the issue is whether you can rely on the CFO department to let you grow your business and to provide you with the kind of feedback you need to really understand how your business is functioning in all those kind of units, in all those geographies.
Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about kind of this movement toward these executives who are growing with kind of almost without abandon or with abandon, and how they're treating the market, how they're treating the growth of the company, and also kind of just in general. Do you feel like it is just the era of the millennial that has a different work ethic, that looks at business differently than what we had of CEOs that started businesses 20 years ago?
No, I don't think so. I think that if you look at the American economy, one of the incredible things about the American economy is you've always had guys that will scale businesses. And if you look, for example, in microchips, the company that owns the market for mobile microchips, ARM, is a British company, and it's about, say, 1/20th the size of Intel.
Wow.
It just never had the ambition to scale in the way Intel had that ambition. So first of all, it's a cultural thing that American business rewards this kind of scaling process, and American entrepreneurs love to do it. I think that there are other issues with how those companies act in the public domain. And Uber's misstep over the past while has been this kind of sense that, can I quite trust them? If they're going to go after journalists, for example, maybe they're not as clean as I'd hoped. And that's very, very important for the kind of services they're offering. If you look at Airbnb in contrast, and I'm sure that many of your viewers have been perhaps even more familiar with Airbnb as a business. If you look at Airbnb, then the trust building is absolutely central, even to the construction of its platform. So you really want very structured ways to grow trust amongst people that have never met each other. And Uber, to a certain extent, is like that. And I think unless they get back to that and realize whether it's an error of a young millennial or it's an error in the culture of the business, they have to get back to this absolute founding principle that you're out there to create trust among strangers.
Yeah. Well, I think that lines up quite nicely with the hospitality business. Obviously, Airbnb is definitely a good example. In the food service, of course, it's all about trust of where the sourcing comes from, or the menu development, and even to a certain extent, the very brand development. Once a brand kind of says, "Hey, this is who we are, this is what we're about," and consumers buy into it. Chipotle is a great example. They seem to have been able to break through that element of trust and gain it from a large consumer group who now just is they're raving fans of this product.
And
are there certain tricks to that? How do you see companies that are doing that better than others?
Well, I think that Airbnb has been a phenomenal example, but it's interesting that you say about Chipotle as well, that there was some history there before the guys took it on. If you look at Airbnb and look at the origins of Airbnb, you had an organization called Couchsurfing.com. And Couchsurfing.com is like Airbnb without the fees.
Right.
So there already was a kind of core community of people that did a kind of Airbnb type share, share a couch, share the bed, or share the bedroom, not the bed, I'm sure. So I think that the fact that you've got something to build on and you've got this existing set of relationships out there to build on is really important. I don't think it's not so simple to start it up from scratch, but I think in the actual food industry, we've all got to trust that as these companies scale, they're able to look after our health interests and the hygiene side of it. So I suspect that they're in the same boat as Uber as well. It doesn't take much to lose that trust, and look around. All the banks have lost trust. Great that these young companies are winning it back, but it can easily fall away as well.
Right. Any tactics that these young leaders and or executives that are moving into building businesses kind of from scratch where they are, maybe they started out of their small cities and now all of a sudden they've been able to scale into multi-million and or multi-billion-dollar brands. Anything that you're finding in terms of characteristics around management teams or leadership or executives that kind of shine through that says this is the guy that will or won't make it?
Well, I'm not sure that I could pinpoint that. Will this guy be the critical factor for that organization? But one thing I do find with the young team is that they do want to set out to change the economy. It's not just about can I grow a business, it's can I change the way things are done. And that, I think, is the added kind of motivation that really attracts other people. There's some sense in which they are a movement setting out to change society. And it's phenomenal. You know, it's a really great way for young people to approach their lives, approach their work, and approach business.
Yeah, and I think that's dead on with what we're seeing in the restaurant spaces. There's a lot of new brands that are kind of in the game right now to either change the way fast food is done or change the way fast casual is even done. And they've taken on a whole new approach, whether it's health conscious menu development, or even in some cases really putting together whole infrastructures around, you know, supply, sourcing, all of that kind of thing, which I think is kind of these innovative, more technology driven aspects of business as they continue to grow that. So when you look at the book, for readers that might that want to take a look at Shift, what are some of the big takeaways that they would get from this book?
Well, I think the really big takeaway is that there is a new power structure in the economy, and it is the ecosystem or the community effect. You know, that actually, if you look at how many new businesses are formed, a lot of them, and it'll be the same with companies like Uber, they rely on common infrastructure and they rely on common software code. Many of them are built on open source software. So there's a sense in which these platforms are built on a kind of, if you like, a commons, you know, what we might call the Creative Commons or I guess the Creative Commons, or an openness about the way key infrastructure is built. So the takeaway for me is that if you look around and you're looking to scale a business or you're looking to start a business, think community first. Think about, I don't mean community in that old sense that the neighborhood, but I mean the community of people online that have helped to build a new infrastructure and I think are there to draw on to grow businesses. You know, it wouldn't surprise me if you went into companies like Uber to find that a lot of those people have worked in open source projects for some time, for example. So they have a new way of working, a different way of working, and very much a movement-based way of working. And I think that's my big takeaway, that's really what's driving change in the economy.
One last question for you, Haydn. I want to just kind of get your feedback on this. So Uber does something that's kind of unique in the hospitality space, and that is they do this upcharging, surge pricing, as they call it, for either when there's limited resources, or so they claim, that says, hey, it starts snowing in New York City or it's raining in London, and those surge prices jump. Do you think that other businesses have the ability, because restaurants are looking at this as a potential model to either surge price reservations or even surge price menu items on Saturday night when there's just less tables available? Do you think that is a potential business model that we'll see more and more companies and industries adapting to?
Well, actually, I think we've seen other industries do it. I think if you go back to the low-cost airlines, of course, first 10 flights were less than $10, you know, and as the flight fills up, you pay more and more, and probably paid more than the old airlines. So I think so, yeah, and I don't see why there should be any inherent reason that people on a Saturday night should pay any more. And we see it in the drinks trade. There's a couple of hours a day where you pay considerably less. So absolutely, there needs to be differential pricing.
All right, Haydn, thank you so much for stopping in on this episode this week. Always fun to pick your brain and learn a little bit about what you're doing out there. You know, for our viewers, when does the book release and where can they find it?
Well, the book's out there. It's actually officially released on January the 17th, but that's the paperback version. You can already get the Amazon version, titled Shift, subtitle A User's Guide to the New Economy.
Excellent. Thank you so much. We'll see you hopefully soon here on another episode of On Foodable Weekly.
Okay, thanks, Paul. Bye-bye now.